Nor do modern scientists have knowledge of tornado weapons. Nonetheless, this soul can never be cut into pieces nor annihilated by any number of weapons, regardless of scientific devices. Nor was it ever possible to cut the individual soul from the original soul. The Mayavadis, however, cannot describe how the individual soul evolved from ignorance and consequently become covered by illusionary energy because they are atomic individual souls, Sanatana, eternally. They are prone to be covered by the illusionary energy, and thus they become separated from the association of the Supreme Lord. Just as a spark of the fire, although one in quality with fire, are prone to be extinguished when out of the fire. In the Varaha Purana, the living entities are described as separated part and parcel of the Supreme. They are eternally so, according to Bhagavad Gita also. So even after being liberated from illusion, the living entities remain a separate identity, as is evident from the teachings of the Lord to Arjuna. Arjuna became liberated by the knowledge received from Krishna, but he never became one with Krishna. Text 24. Achedyo yam adhayo yam akledyo soshaya evacha nitya sarva gata sthanur achalo yam sanatana. Translation by His Divine Grace Sri Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Jai Srila Prabhupada. This individual soul is unbreakable and insoluble and can be neither burned nor dried. He is everlasting, all pervading, unchangeable, immovable, and eternally the same. Text 25. अव्यक्तो यम् अचिन्त्यो यम् अविकर्यो यम् युच्यते तस्माद् एवं विधिवैनम् नानु शोचितम् अर्हसि. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Jai Srila Prabhupada. It is said that the soul is invisible, inconceivable, immutable, and unchangeable. Knowing this, you should not grieve for the body. Text 26. अथ चैनं नित्यं जातं नित्यं य मनसे मृत्यं तथापि त्वं महाबाहो नैनं शोचितम् अर्हसि. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Jai Srila Prabhupada. If, however, you think that the soul is perpetually born and always dies, still you have no reason to lament, O mighty armed. Text 27. जातस्य हि ध्रुवं मृत्युर् ध्रुवं जन्म मृतस्य च तस्मात् अपरिहार्यते नातं सचितुम् अर्हसि. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Jai Srila Prabhupada. For one who has taken his birth, death is certain, and for one who is dead, birth is certain. Therefore, in this unavoidable discharge of your duty, you should not lament. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Jai Srila Prabhupada. One has to take birth according to one's activities of life. And after finishing one term of activities, one has to die to take birth for the next. In this way, the cycle of birth, death is revolving, one after the other, without liberation. This cycle of birth and death does not, however, support unnecessary murder, slaughter, and war. But at the same time, violence and war are inevitable factors in human society for keeping law and order. The The battle of Kurukshetra, being the will of the Supreme, was an inevitable event, and to fight for the right cause is the duty of a Kshatriya. Why should he be afraid of or aggrieved at the death of his relatives, since he was discharging his proper duty? He did not deserve to break the law, thereby becoming subjected to the reaction of which he was so afraid. By avoiding the discharge of his proper duty, he would not be able to stop the death of his relatives, and he would be degraded due to his selection of the wrong path of action. Text 28. अव्यक्ताधीनि भूतानि व्यक्ता मध्यानि भारत अव्यक्तनिध्यन्तेयेव तत्र का परिदेवना. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Jai Srila Prabhupada. All created beings are unmanifested in their beginning, manifested in their interim state, and unmanifest again when they are annihilated. So, what need is there for lamentation? Text 29. Ascharyavat pashyati kashchit inam आश्चर्यवद् वदति तथैव चन्या आश्चर्यवच् चैनम् अन्यः श्नोति श्रुत्यप्येनं वेद च चैवं कश्चित्. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Jai Srila Prabhupada. Some took on the soul as amazing, some describe him as amazing, and some hear of him as amazing, while others, even after hearing about him, cannot understand him at all. Text 30. देहि नित्यम् अवधोऽयं देह सर्वस्य भारत तस्मात् सर्वाणि भूतानि न त्वं शोचितुम् अर्हसि. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Jai Srila Prabhupada. O descendant of Bharata, he who dwells in the body is eternal and can never be slain. Therefore, you need not grieve for any creature. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Jai Srila Prabhupada. The Lord now concludes the chapter of instruction on the immutable spirit soul. In describing the immortal soul in various ways, Lord Krishna established that the soul is immortal and the body is temporary. Therefore, Arjuna, as a Kshatriya, should not abandon his duty out of fear that his grandfather and teacher, Bhishma and Drona, will die in the battle. On the authority of Sri Krishna, one is to believe that there is a soul different from the material body, not that there is no such thing as soul, or that living symptom develop at a certain stage of material maturity, resulting from the interaction of chemicals. Though the soul is immortal, violence is not encouraged, but at the time of war, it is not discouraged when there is actual need of it. That need must be justified in terms of the sanction of the Lord and not capriciously. Text 31. Swadharmampi चावेक्ष्य न विकम्पितम् अर्हसि धर्माद्यधि युध्यत् श्रेयोऽन्यत् क्षत्रियस्य न विद्यते. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Jai Srila Prabhupada. Considering your specific duty as a Kshatriya, you should know that there is no better engagement for you than fighting on religious principles, and so there is no need of hesitation. Text 32. यच्छ्रेय यच्छ्रेय चोपनम स्वर्गद्वारम अपावृतं सुखिनः क्षत्रिय पार्थ लभ्यन्ते युद्धम ईदृशम्. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Jai Srila Prabhupada. O Partha, happy are the Kshatriyas to whom such fighting opportunities come unsought, opening for them the doors of the heavenly planets. Text 33. अथ चेत्त्वम् इमं धर्म्यं सङ्ग्रामं न कर्षयसि तथा स्वधरं कीर्तिं च हित्वा पापम् अवाप्स्यसि. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Jai Srila Prabhupada. If, however, you do not fight this religious war, then you will certainly incur sins for neglecting your duties and thus lose your reputation as a fighter. Text 34. अकृतिं चापि भूतानि कष्यस्यन्ति ते व्ययं संभवस्य चक्रितिर्मानद् अतिच्यते. Translation by His Divine Grace Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Jai Srila Prabhupada. People will always speak of your infamy, and for one who has been honored, dishonor is worse than death. Text 35. Bhayad भयद्रणादुपरन्तं मम स्मन्यन्ते त्वां महारथ येषां च त्वं बहुमतो भूत्वा यसीस् लाघवम्. Translation based on Bhakti Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Jai Srila Prabhupada. The great generals who have highly esteemed your name and fame will think that you have left the battlefield out of fear only, and thus they will consider you as a coward. Text 36. Avat, uh, अवाच्य वादंश्च बहून् वदिष्यन्ति त्वहित निन्दस्त्वसमर्थ्यं ततो दुःखतारं नु किम्. Translation based on Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Jai Srila Prabhupada. Your enemies will describe you in many unkind words and scorn your ability. What could be more painful for you? Text 37. हतो वा प्राप्सि स्वर्गं जित्वा वा भोक्ष्यसे महिम तस्मात् उत्कृष्ट कौन्तेय युद्ध कृत निश्चयम्. Translation based on Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Jai Srila Prabhupada. O son of Kunti, either you will be killed on the battlefield and attain the heavenly planet, or you will be conquered and enjoy the earthly kingdom. Therefore, get up and fight with determination. Text 38. सुख दुःखे समकृत्वा लाभहालाभौ जयाजयौ ततो युद्धय युज्यस्व नैवं पापम् अवाप्स्यसि. Translation based on Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Jai Srila Prabhupada. Do thou fight for the sake of fighting, without considering happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat, and by doing so you shall never incur sin. Text 39. एषा ते विहित संख्ये बुद्धिर्योगे त्वा इमं शृणु बुद्धय युक्तो याय पार्थ कर्म बंधनं प्रहास्यसि. Translation by Divine Grace Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Jai Srila Prabhupada. Thus far I have declared to you the analytical knowledge of Sankhya philosophy. Now listen to the knowledge of yoga, whereby one works without fruitive results. O son of Pratha, when you act by such intelligence, you can free yourself from the bondage of works. Text 40. नेहाभिक्रमनाशोऽस्ति प्रत्यवायो न विद्यते स्वल्पमप्यस्य धर्मस्य त्रायते महतो भयात्. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Jai Srila Prabhupada. In this endeavor, there is no loss or diminution, and a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. Purport. Activity in Krishna consciousness or acting for the benefit of Krishna without expectation of sense gratification is the highest transcendental quality of work. Even a small beginning of such activity find no impediment, nor can that small beginning be lost at any stage. Any work begun on the material plane has to be completed, otherwise the whole attempt become a failure. But any work begun in Krishna consciousness has a permanent effect, even though not finished. The performer of such work is therefore not at a loss, even if his work in Krishna consciousness is incomplete. 1% done in Krishna consciousness bears permanent results, so that the next beginning is from the point of 2%. Whereas in material activity, without 100% success, there is no profit. Ajamila performed his duty in some percentage of Krishna consciousness, but the result he enjoyed at the end was 100% by the grace of the Lord. There is a nice verse in connection in Srimad Bhagavatam. त्यक्त्वा स्वधर्मं चरणाम्बुजं हरेर् भजन् न पकोत्तपयत् यदि यत्र क्वाभद्रम् अभुद् अमुष्य किं को व्रता अपो भजतां स्वधर्मताम्. If someone gives up self gratification gratificatory pursuits and work in Krishna consciousness and then falls down on account of not completing his work, what loss is there on his part? And what can one gain if one perform his material activities perfectly? Bhagavatam 1.5.17. Or as the Christian says, what profit a man if he gain the whole world, yet suffers the loss of his eternal soul? Material activities and their results end with the body, but work in Krishna consciousness carries the person again to Krishna consciousness, even after the loss of the body. At least one is sure to have a chance in the next life of being born again in the human being, either in the family of a great cultured Brahmana or in the rich aristocratic family. That will give one a further chance for elevation. That is the unique quality of work done in Krishna consciousness. Text 41. व्यवसायत्मिका बुद्धेर एकः कुरु नंदन बहुशाखा यनंतश्च बुद्धायो व्यवसायिनाम. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Jai Srila Prabhupada. Those who are on this path are resolute in purpose, and their aim is one. O beloved child of the Kurus, the intelligence of those who are irresolute is many branched. Purport: a strong faith in Krishna consciousness that one should be elevated to the highest perfection of life is called Vivasayatmika, intelligence. The Chaitanya Charitamrita states, Shraddha Shabde Vishwase Kahe Shuddha Krishna Bhakti Kaile Sarva Karma Krita Hai. Faith means unflinching trust in something sublime. When one is engaged in the duties of Krishna consciousness, he did not act in relationship to the material world with obligation to family traditions, humanity, or nationality. Fruitive activities are the engagement of one's reaction from the past good or bad deeds. When one is awake in Krishna consciousness, he needs result in his activities. When one is situated in Krishna consciousness, all activities are on the absolute plane, for they are no longer subject to change. In Krishna consciousness, one can render the highest service to everyone, namely self, family, society, country, humanity, etc. If Krishna is satisfied by one's action, then everyone will be satisfied. Service in Krishna consciousness is, however, best practiced under the able guidance of a spiritual master who is a bona fide representative of Krishna, who knows the nature of the student and who can guide him to act in Krishna consciousness. As such, to be well versed in Krishna consciousness, one has to act firmly and obey the representative of Krishna, and one should accept the instruction of the bona fide spiritual master as one's mission in life. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur instructs us in his famous prayer for the spiritual masters as follow. Yasya prasada bhagvat prasado yasya prasadam nagati kutopi dhayan stubam tasya yasya sandyam vande gurushe charanaru vindam. By satisfaction of the spiritual master, the Supreme Personality of Godhead becomes satisfied. And by not satisfying the spiritual master, there is no chance of being promoted to the plane of Krishna consciousness. I should therefore meditate and pray for his mercy 3 times a day and offer my respectful obeisances unto him, my spiritual master. The whole process, however, depends on perfect knowledge of the soul beyond the conception of the body, not theoretically but practically, when there is no longer chance for sense gratification manifested in fruitive activities. One who is not firmly fixed in mind is diverted by various type of fruitive acts. Text 42 and 43. Yam imam pushpitam vachim pravadyanti avipashyat veda vada rata apartha nanad ashit vadinam कामतमाना स्वर्ग पर जना जन्म कर्म फलम प्रदम क्रिया विशेष बहुलाम भोगेश्वर गतिम प्रति Translation based Evangelist Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Jai Srila Prabhupada. Men of small knowledge are very much attached to the flowery words of the Vedas, which recommends various fruitive activities for elevation to the heavenly planets, resultant good birth, power, and so forth. Being desirous of sense gratification and opulent life, they say that there is nothing more than this. Text 44. भोगेश्वर प्रसक्तानां तयपहृतचेतसां व्यवसायत्मिका बुद्धि समाधूयते. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Jai Srila Prabhupada. In the mind of those who are too attached to sense enjoyment and material opulence, and those who are bewildered by such things, the resolute determination of devotional service to the Supreme Lord does not take place. Purport. Samadhi means fixed mind. The Vedic dictionary, the Nirukti says, Samyag adhyate smina atma tattva yathatmayam. When the mind is fixed for understanding the self, it is called samadhi. Samadhi is never possible for a person interested in material sense enjoyment, not for those who are bewildered by such temporary things. They are more or less condemned by the process of material energy. Text 45. Traigunya Vishya Nistrigunya Bhavajana Nirdvanda Nitya Sattvasto Niryoga Kshema Atmavan. Translation by His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Jai Srila Prabhupada. The Vedas mainly deal with the subject of three modes of material nature. Rise above these modes, O Arjuna, be transcendental to all of them. Be free from all dualities and from all anxieties for gain and safety, and be established in the self. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Jai Srila Prabhupada. All material activities involve action and reaction in the three modes of material nature. They are meant for fruitive result, which cause bondage in the material world. The Vedas deal mostly with fruitive activities to gradually elevate the general public from the field of sense gratification to a position on the transcendental plane. Arjuna, as a student and friend of Lord Krishna, is advised to raise himself to the transcendental position of a Vedanta philosophy, where in the beginning there is Brahma Jigyasa, or questions on the supreme transcendence. All the living entities who are in the material world are struggling very hard for existence. For them, the Lord, after creation of the material world, gave the Vedic wisdom advising how to live and get rid of material entanglement. When the activities for sense gratification, namely the Karma Kanda chapter, are finished, then the chance for spiritual realization is offered in the form of Upanishads, which are part of different Vedas. As the Bhagavad Gita is the part of fifth Veda, namely the Mahabharata. The Upanishad mark the beginning of transcendental life. As long as the material body exists, there are action and reaction in the material modes. One has to learn tolerance in the face of dualities, such as happiness and distress, or cold and warmth, and by tolerating such dualities, become free from anxieties regarding gain and loss. This transcendental position is achieved in full Krishna consciousness when one is fully dependent on the goodwill of Krishna. Uh, Vanchakalpatarubhasya Kripasindhu Bhaivacha Padnam Pavnibhyo Vishnu Namo Namaha. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to His case Gauranga Sundaras Gurudev.
Hare Krishna everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, Mataji, you are audible.
Hare Krishna Gurudev Dandavat Pranam. Jai Srila Prabhupada. नमामि श्रीपदे कृष्णपृष्ठाय श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती प्रसादकानि प्रचंड विश्लेषण पश्चिम देशधारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद सत्य गौतम शिवाशा हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे राम 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 हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे राम 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 हरे हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे राम हरे all Krishna Prabhupada, all Krishna Prabhupada, all Krishna Prabhupada, all Krishna Krishna Dasgurdev, all Krishna Krishna Dasgurdev, all Krishna Krishna Dasgurdev. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 46. यावन अर्था उदापाने सर्वथा सम्प्लुदोतके तवन सर्वेषु वेदेषु ब्रह्मणस्याभिजानता. Translation by His Divine Grace Shri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Jai Srila Prabhupada. All purposes that are served by the small pond can at once be served by the great reservoirs of water. Similarly, all the purposes of the Vedas can be served to one who knows the purpose behind them. Purport. The rituals and sacrifices mentioned in the Karma Kanda revision of the Vedic literature are to encourage gradual development of self realization. And the purpose of self realization is clearly stated in the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, 15.15. The purpose of studying the Vedas is to know Lord Krishna, the primable cause of everything. So, self realization means understanding Krishna and one's eternal relationship with Him. The relationship of living entities with Krishna is also mentioned in the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. The living entities are parts and parcels of Krishna. Therefore, revival of Krishna consciousness by the individual living entity is the highest perfectional stage of Vedic knowledge. This is confirmed in the Srimad Bhagavatam 3.37.7 as follows. Ahobatha subhapatu yaj jihabagre vartate namatubhyam तेपुस्तापस्ते जुहुनु सस्नु आर्या Brahmanashur Nama Danhati Yete. O my Lord, a person who is chanting your holy name, although born of a low family like that of Chandal, dog eater, is situated on the highest platform of self realization. Such a person must have performed all kinds of penances and sacrifices according to Vedic rituals and studied the Vedic literatures many times after taking his birth in all the holy places of pilgrimage. Such a person is considered to be the best of Aryan family. So one must be intelligent enough to understand the purpose of the Vedas without being attached to the rituals only and must not desire to be elevated to the heavenly kingdoms for a better quantity of sense gratification. It is not possible for the common man in this age to follow all the rules and regulations of the Vedic rituals and the injunctions of the Vedantas and the Upanishads. It requires much time, energy, knowledge, and resources to execute the purposes of the Vedas. This is hardly possible in this age. The best purpose of Vedic culture is served, however, by chanting the holy name of the Lord as recommended by Lord Chaitanya, the deliverer of all fallen souls. Who Lord, when
तेरे को
Lord
पता है इससे क्या
Chaitanya
कर रखा है?
was
कि
asked by
यूट्यूब
a
लाइव
great
स्ट्रीमिंग
Vedic
नहीं हो रही
scholar
थी, तो इस आईडी पे तो है मैंने वीडियो
Prakshananda
चला रखा है,
Saraswati, why he,
स्क्रीन
the
शेयर कर
Lord,
रखी है,
was
जिस पे
chanting the
वॉइस आ
holy
रही
name
है,
of the Lord
पूरी
like a
स्क्रीन शेयर सब देख रहे हैं
sentimentalist
कि
instead of
मेरी आईडी
studying
से
Vedanta
लॉगिन कर रखा
philosophy.
है,
The Lord
इसलिए तो
replied
स्क्रीन
that his
रिकॉर्डिंग
spiritual
चला रहा है,
master
जिससे
found him
ऑडियो
to
आ
be
रहा
a
है
great
इससे
fool,
शेयरिंग हो
and
रही है,
thus he
इसलिए ये चला
asked him
रखा
to
है वीडियो।
chant the holy name of Lord Krishna.
रिकॉर्डिंग वाला
He
एक
did so
सॉफ्टवेयर
and
है जो
became
यूट्यूब की लाइव
ecstatic like a
स्ट्रीमिंग
madman. In this age of Kali,
इंडियन
most of
जुगाड़
the
भी हो जाएगा
population
तो
is foolish and
इंडियन
not
जुगाड़ देख
adequately
रही तू मेरा?
educated to understand Vedanta philosophy. The best purpose of Vedanta philosophy is served
मुझे
by
मत निकाल,
inoffensively
तुझे
chanting the
चार्ट
holy
करना
name
है कि
of
ना फिर
Lord.
से वो करना।
Vedanta is the last word in Vedic wisdom, and the author
रिजल्ट
and
पता
knower
कुछ
of the
गिर
Vedanta
जाएगी
philosophy
क्योंकि
is Lord Krishna. And the highest Vedantist in the
पीछे तो नहीं
great
जाती है।
soul is the great soul who takes
तीन लोग
pleasure
हो गए
in
उसमें वो
chanting the
भी
holy name of the Lord. That is
लूज
the
होगी,
ultimate purpose of
लूज
all
होगी।
Vedic
तो उसमें
mysticism.
बहुत तो तीन सेक्शन है, मतलब
Text
कितने में भी तीन
47.
सही सही उसमें भी तीन
कर्मणि एव धिकारस्ते मा फलेषु कदाचन मा कर्मा
क्या हुआ
फलहेतुर्भूः मा त्रिसंगस्त अकर्मणि. Translation by His Divine Shri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. You have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself to be the cause of the results of your activities, and never be attached to not doing of your duty.
कौन सी माई अपनी तेरी माई
Verse 2.48.
कौन सा टेम्पलेट
योगस्था कुरु कर्माणि
पैसे देगी क्या
संगम त्यक्त्वा धनञ्जय सिद्धि अस्ति समभूत्वा मत्पं योग उच्यते. Translation by Divine Vishesha Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Be steadfast in yoga, O Arjuna. Perform your duty and abandon all attachment to success or failure. Such evenness of mind is called yoga. Verse 2.49. दूरिनाहि अवारं कर्म बुद्धियोग धनञ्जया बुद्धयो सारणम् अन्विच्य कर्पणः फलहेतवः. Translation by His Divine Vishesha Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. O Dhananjay, rid yourself of all fruitive activities by devotional service and surrender fully to the consciousness. Those who want to enjoy the fruits of their work are misers. Verse 2.50. बुद्धियुक्तो जहातिह उभिशुक्रात दुष्कृते तस्मत् योगायुजस्व योगकर्माशु कौशलम्. Translation by Divine Vishesha Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. A man engaged in devotional service rids himself of both good and bad actions even in this life. Therefore, strive for yoga, O Arjuna, which is the art of all work. Verse 51. कर्मजं बुद्धियुक्ता हि फलं त्यक्ता मनीषिणा जन्मबन्धा विमुक्ता पदं गच्छन्ति अनम्यम्. Translation by Divine Vishesha Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. The wise engaged in devotional service take refuge in the Lord and free themselves from the cycle of birth and death by renouncing the fruits of action in the material world. In this way, they can attain the state beyond all miseries. Text 52. यादते मोहकलीलं बुद्धिर्व्यातितरस्यति तदा गन्तसि विवेकं श्रूयश्च च. Translation by His Divine Vishesha Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada.
कितने साल पहले करो
Jai Srila Prabhupada. When your intelligence has passed out of the dense forest of delusion, you shall become indifferent to all that has been heard and all that is to be heard here. Verse 53. श्रुतिपिपत्रिपन्याते यत् सत्स्यति निश्चला सम्भदम् आचला बुद्धिः तदा योगम् अवस्पशि. Translation by Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. When your mind is disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas, and when it remains fixed in the trance of self-realization, then it will have attained the divine consciousness. Text 54. Sthita Arjuna Uvacha Sthita Prajnasaka Vasa Samadhisthasya Keshava Sthitadhi Kim Pravasheta Kim Ashita Vrajeta Kim. Translation by His Divine Vishesha Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Arjuna said, what are the symptoms of consciousness is thus march in transcendence? How does he speak? And what is his language? How does he sit? And how does he walk? Verse 55. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Prajayati Yada Kamam Sarvan Partha Manugatan Atmani Evatmana Tusta Sthita Prajnasta Tadvachati. Translation by His Divine Vishesha Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. The blessed Lord said, O Partha, when a man gives up all varieties of sense desire which arise from the mental concoction, and when his mind finds satisfaction in the self alone, then he is said to be in pure transcendental consciousness. Text 56. दुःखेश आनुविघ्नमना सुखेषु विगतस्पृहा भीतारागा भयक्रोधा स्थितधीर्मुनिरुच्यते. Translation by Sri A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. One who is not disturbed in spite of the threefold miseries, who is not elated when there is happiness, and who is free from attachment, fear, anger is called a sage of steady mind. Verse 56. या सर्वत्र न अभीष्ण्याः तत्तत्प्राप शुभं नभीनान्तति नादेस्ति तस्य प्रज्ञा प्रतिष्ठिता. Translation by Divine Vishesha Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All praise to Srila Prabhupada. He who is without attachment, who does not rejoice when he obtains good, nor lament when he obtains evil, is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. Text 58. यदसंहर्ति चायं कूर्मयग्निव सर्वसा इन्द्रियान्द्रियतेयवस्तस्य प्रज्ञा प्रतिष्ठिता. Translation by Divine Shashi Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. One who is able to withdraw his senses from sense objects as the tortoise draws himself within the cell is to be understood as truly situated in knowledge. Text 51. विषया विनिवर्तन्ते नीरहारस्य देहिना रसावर्जं रसोऽप्यश्च परं दृष्टा निवर्तते. Translation by Divine Vishesha Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. The embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, though the taste for sense object remains. But seizing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness. Purport. Unless one is transcendently situated, it is not possible to cease from sense enjoyment. The process of restriction from sense enjoyment by rules and regulations is something like restricting a diseased person from certain types of eatables. The patient, however, neither likes such restrictions nor loses his taste for eatables. Similarly, sense restriction by some spiritual process like Ashtanga Yoga in the matter of yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, etc. is recommended for less intelligent persons who have no better knowledge. But one who has tasted the beauty of the Supreme Lord Krishna in the course of his advancement in Krishna consciousness no longer has a taste for dead material things. Therefore, restrictions are there for the less intelligent neophytes in the spiritual advancement of life. But such restrictions are only good if one actually has a taste for Krishna consciousness. When one is actually Krishna conscious, he automatically loses his taste for the pale things. Text 60. Ya tato ya api kontya purushashe vipaschita indrayani paramatni haranti prasabham mana. Translation by His Divine Vishesha Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. The senses are so strong and impetuous, O Arjuna, that they forcibly carry away the mind even of a man of discrimination who is endeavoring to control them. Text 61. Tani sarvani samyamya yukta asita matpara vaseya yashyandriyani tasya parijana pratishtata. Translation by His Divine Vishesha Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. One who restrains his senses and fixes his consciousness upon me is known as a man of steady intelligence. Text 62. ध्यातुमीशायनपुंसा सङ्गस्ते सोपजायते सङ्गसंज्ञात कामा कामक्रोधो विजायते. Translation by His Venerable Shri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All Krishna Srila Prabhupada. While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them, and from such attachment, lust develops, and from lust, anger arises. Purport. One who is not Krishna conscious is subjected to material desires while contemplating the objects of senses. The senses require real engagements, and if they are not engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, they will certainly seek engagement in the service of materialism. In the material world, everyone, including Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, to say nothing of other demigods in the heavenly planets, is subjected to the influence of sense objects. And the only method to get out of this puzzle material existence is to become Krishna conscious. Lord Shiva was deep in meditation, but when Parvati agitated him for sense pleasure, he agreed to the proposal, and as a result, Kartikeya was born. When Haridas Thakur was a young devotee of the Lord, he was similarly allured by the incarnation of Maya Devi. But Haridasa easily passed the test because of his unalloyed devotion to Lord Krishna. As illustrated in the above mentioned verse of Sri Yamunacharya, a senior devotee of the Lord shuns all material sense enjoyment due to his higher taste for spiritual enjoyment in the association of Lord Krishna. That is the secret of success. One who is not, therefore, in Krishna consciousness, however powerful he may be in controlling his senses by artificial repression, is surely ultimately to fail, for the slightest thought of sense pleasure will agitate him to gratify his desires. Text 63. क्रोधद्भावाद्विसम्मूढा सम्मूढस्मृति विभ्रमा स्मृतिभ्रंशद्बुद्धिनाशो बुद्धिनाशत्प्रणश्यति. Translation by His Venerable Shri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. From anger, delusion arises, and from delusion, bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost, and when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into this material pool. Purport. By development of Krishna consciousness, one can know that everything has its use in service of the Lord. Those who are without knowledge of Krishna consciousness artificially try to avoid material objects, and as a result, although they desire liberation from material bondage, they do not attain to the perfect stage of renunciation. On the other hand, a person in Krishna consciousness knows how to use everything in the service of the Lord. Therefore, he does not become a victim of material consciousness. For example, for an impersonalist, the Lord or the Absolute, being impersonal, cannot eat. Whereas an impersonalist tries to avoid good eatables, a devotee knows that Krishna is the supreme enjoyer and that he eats all that he offered to him in devotion. So, after offering good eatables to the Lord, the devotee takes the remnants called prasadam. Thus, everything becomes spiritualized and there is no danger of a downfall. The devotee takes prasadam in Krishna consciousness, whereas the non-devotee rejects it as material. The impersonalist therefore cannot enjoy life due to his artificial renunciation, and for this reason, a slight agitation of the mind pulls him down again into this pool of material existence. It is said that such a soul, even though rising up to the point of liberation, falls down again due to his not having support in devotional service. Verse 64. रागदेशाविमुक्तस्तो विषयानिन्द्रियसश्चरन् आत्मवसर्विदयत्मा prasadam adhikachati. Translation by His Divine Vishesha Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All Krishna Srila Prabhupada. One who can control his senses by practicing the regulated principles of freedom can obtain the complete mercy of the Lord and thus become free from all attachment and aversion. Purport. It is already explained that one may externally control the senses by some artificial process, but unless the senses are engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord, there is every chance of a fall. Although the person in full Krishna consciousness may apparently be on the sensual plane, because of his being Krishna consciousness, he has no attachment to the sensual activities. The Krishna conscious person is concerned only with the satisfaction of Krishna and nothing else. Therefore, he is transcendental to all attachment. If Krishna wants, the devotee can do anything which is ordinarily undesirable, and if Krishna does not want, he shall not do that which he would have ordinarily done for his own satisfaction. Therefore, to act or not to act is within his control, because he acts only under the direction of Krishna. This consciousness is the causeless mercy of the Lord, which the devotee can achieve in spite of his being attached to the sensual platform. Text 65. प्रशदे सर्वदुःखायान् हानिरस्योपजायते प्रसन्नचेतस्याशु बुद्धिपारगतिष्ठते. Translation by Stephen Relationship Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. For one who is situated in the divine consciousness, the threefold miseries of material existence exist no longer. In such a happy state, one's intelligence soon becomes steady. Text 66. Nasti buddhir ayuktasya na chuttasya bhavana na cha vayata sthanam santi ashyantasya kuta sukham. Translation by Srivana Shashi Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. One who is not in transcendental consciousness can have neither a controlled mind nor steady intelligence, without which there is no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace? Text 67. Indriyanam hi charantam yanmano vidhyate tad asyaharati prajnam vayunavam ivam vashi. Translation by Srivana Shashi Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All Guru Srila Prabhupada. As a boat on the water is swept away by a strong wind, even one of the senses on which the mind focuses can carry away a man's intelligence. Text 68. Tasmadyasa mahabhago nidhyatrim sarvasa indriyani indriyastriyavash tasya prajna pratisthata. Translation by His Divine Shashi Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Therefore, O mighty armed, one whose senses are restrained from their objects is certainly of steady intelligence. Text 69. योनिशा सर्वभूतानां तस्यं चक्राति संयमे यस्यां चक्रति भूतानि समे सापसतो मुने. Translation by Srivana Shashi Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All Guru Srila Prabhupada. What is night for all beings is the time of awakening for the self-control, and the time of awakening for all beings is the night for the introspective state. Purport. There are two classes of intelligent men. The one is intelligent in material activities for sense gratification, and the other is introspective and awake to the cultivation of self-realization. Activities of the introspective sake or thoughtful man are night for persons materially absorbed. Materialistic persons remain asleep in such a night due to their ignorance of self-realization. The introspective sake remains alert in the night of the materialistic man. The sake feels transcendental pleasure in the gradual advancement of spiritual culture, whereas the man in materialistic activities, being asleep to self-realization, dreams of varieties of sense pleasure, feeling sometimes happy and sometimes distressed in the sleeping condition. The introspective man is always indifferent to materialistic happiness and distress. He goes on with his self-realization activities undisturbed by material reaction. Text 70. अपूर्याणम् अचलप्रतिष्ठं समुद्रम् अपप्रविशति यत्तत्कामायं प्रविशन्ति सर्वसयन्तम् अप्नोति न कमकम्. Translation by Ejwani Shishi Bhaktivinoda Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. A person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled but is always still, can alone achieve peace, and not the man who strives to satisfy such desires. Text 71. Bihaya kamane sarvan pumamascharati nispra nirmano nirahankara sasantim adhigacchati. Translation by Stephen Shepherd. A person who has given up all desires for sense gratification, who lives free from desires, who has given up all sense of proprietorship and is devoid of false ego, he alone can attain real peace. Text 72. एष ब्राह्मे स्थिते पार्थानेन पापामि मुह्यते स्थितवासमन्ते कल्पे ब्रह्मणैवानुरक्षति. Translation by Student Recitation Bhaktivedanta Jai Srila Prabhupada. That is the way of the spiritual and godly life, after attaining which a man is not bewildered. Being so situated, even at the hour of death, one can enter into the kingdom of God. All Krishna Shila Prabhupada, all Krishna Shila Prabhupada, all Krishna Shila Prabhupada, all Krishna Grace Karan Sudatas Gurudev, all Krishna Grace Karan Sudatas Gurudev, all Krishna Grace Karan Sudatas Gurudev. Panchakalpataru Krishna Devi Pachapatitanam Papini Kupashni Vipuna Mama. Krishna Prabhupada, Sanskrit Karan Sudatas Gurudev. Hare Krishna.
इतने सॉफ्टवेयर चल रहे पता है
Hare Krishna Mataji, Jai Shri Prabhupada. From which Sloka, Malti Mataji?
Krishna Mataji, Jai Shri Prabhupada. Mataji from chapter 3 start. Chapter 3 verse 1.
Okay, Mataji. Hare Krishna, Jai Shri Prabhupada. Jai Sri Karna Sundar Pradeji. This is verse 1. Okay. Arjuna Uvacha Jayasi Chet Karmanaste Madhabuddhir Janardhana Tatikim Karmani Ghoramam Niyojayasi Keshava. Arjuna. Mataji, meaning also recite?
Hare Krishna Mataji, for the important slokas of translation and purport read karna, and for the rest of the slokas, sloka and translation.
सॉरी माता जी, मम्मी आ गई थी बीच में तो मैंने ऑफ कर दिया। जी माता जी। श्लोका translation and purport I read chapter 3 verse 1.
माताजी 108 जो इम्पोर्टेंट श्लोकास है उनका purport आपका रीड करना है, एंड नॉर्मल श्लोकास ट्रांसलेशन रीड कीजिए, एंड इम्पोर्टेंट श्लोकास के लिए श्लोका ट्रांसलेशन एंड purport.
ओके माता जी, बट मुझे सारे इम्पोर्टेंट श्लोकास तो नहीं पता, तो हाउ आई नो कि कौन सा वाले 108 इम्पोर्टेंट श्लोकास में से है एंड कौन से श्लोका का पॉपर्ट नहीं रीड करना। माता जी प्लीज़ गाइड, मुझे सारे 108 श्लोकास नहीं पता है।
हरे कृष्ण माताजी, चैप्टर 3 में फर्स्ट इम्पोर्टेंट श्लोक है 3.9, तो आप बाकी के आप उन्हीं श्लोक एंड ट्रांसलेशन रीड कीजिए, एंड 3.9 पे purport भी रीड करना है आपको.
ओके ओके ठीक है। अर्जुन उवाच जायसि चेत् कर्मणास्ति मतबुद्धिर्जनार्दन तत् किं कर्माणि घोरमं नियोजयासि केशव। Translation. Arjuna said, O Janardana, O Keshava, why do you urge me to engage in this ghastly warfare if you think that intelligence is better than pretty work? Uh, मैं अपने पास से खोलूँ क्या, मतलब पीडीएफ ओपन करूँ श्लोका का। अ, माता जी। जी माता जी। Yes, Mataji. Okay. Sorry, Mataji. इतना वेट करने के लिए 3.9 chapter 3 verse 2 व्यामि श्री व्यामि श्रीनेव वाक्यानि बुद्धिं मोहाय सेवामि तदेकं वाद निश्चित्य येन श्रेयोऽहमप्युनाम् Translation: My intelligence is perverted by your equivocal instructions. Therefore, please tell me decisively what is most beneficial for me. Hare Krishna. Verse 3 Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Lokesmin Devi Vidhanishta Pura Prokta Maya Nagha Snan Yogana Sankhyanam Karma Yogana Yoginam. Translation: The blessed Lord said, O sinless Arjuna, I have already explained that there are two classes of men who realize the self. Some are inclined to understand him by empirical philosophical speculation, and others are inclined to know him by devotional work. Jai Shri Prabhupada, Jai Shri Karma Silas Gurudev Ji. Verse 4 Na karmanam anarambham नासिकर्म्यं पुरुषोऽश्नुते न च सन्न्यासानन्त इव सिद्धिं समाधिगच्छति. Translation: Not by merely abstaining from work can one achieve freedom from reaction, nor by renunciation alone can one attain perfection. Srila Prabhupada Ji's Grace Karmasana's Gurudev Ji, verse 5 न हि कश्चित् क्षाणम् अपि जातु तिष्ठति अकर्मकृत् कर्यते हि अवश्यं कर्म सर्वप्रकृतिजैर्गुणैः. Translation: Sorry, Mataji, मम्मी आ गई थी रूम में, so please forgive me for that. जय श्री प्रभुपाद, जय श्री कर्म समाज गुरुदेव जी. Translation: All men are forced to act helplessly according to the impulses born of the modes of material nature. Therefore, no one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment. Jai Shri Prabhupada, Jai Shri Karma Sandhas Gurudev Ji. Verse 6 Karmendriyani samyamya ya asti mansa samran indriyarthan vimudhatma mityacharaja sa uchyate. Translation: One who restrains the senses and organs of action, but whose mind dwells on sense objects, certainly deludes himself and is called a pretender. Hare Krishna, Jai Shri Prabhupada, Jai Shri Krishna Samaj Gurudev Ji. Verse 7 Yastav indriyani mansa niyamyarabhate arjuna karmendriye karma yogam ashkatavasa vishishyate. Translation: On the other hand, he who controls the senses by the mind and engages his active organs in works of devotion without attachment is by far superior. जय श्रील प्रभुपाद जय श्री कर्म सनातन गुरुदेव जी वर्स 8 नियतां कुरु कर्म त्वं कर्म ज्यायो ह अकर्मणा शरीरयात्रापि च ते न प्रशीर्यत अकर्मणा Translation Perform your prescribed duty, for action is better than inaction. A man cannot even maintain his physical body without work. Shri Srila Prabhupada takes place Karanasalas Gurudev Verse 9 यज्ञार्थकर्मणोऽनन्त्रा लोकोऽयं कर्मबन्धना तदर्थं कर्म कौन्तेय मुक्तसङ्गसमाचर Translation Work done satisfying Lord Vishnu. वर्णाश्रमचरावता पुरुषन् पारल्पमेव Therefore, one has to work for the satisfaction of Vishnu. Any other work done in this material world will be cause of bondage, for both good and evil work has have their reactions, and any reaction binds the performer. Therefore, one has to work in Krishna consciousness to satisfy Krishna, and while performing such activities, one is in a liberated state. This is the great art of doing work, and in the beginning, this process requires very good expert guidance. One should therefore act very diligently under the expert guidance of a devotee of Lord Krishna, or under the direct instruction of Lord Krishna himself, under whom Arjuna had great opportunity to work. Nothing should be uh, performed for sense gratification, but everything should be done for the satisfaction of Krishna. This practice will not only save one from the reaction of work, but will also gradually elevate one to a transcendental loving service of the Lord, which alone can raise one to the kingdom of God. जय श्री प्रभुपाद जय हिंद प्रेस करूंगा समाज गुरुदेव जी Verse 10 सहायज्ञ प्रजा सृष्ट्वा पुरोवचा प्रजापति अनेन प्रसूता विश्वधम् ईशावोस्त इषित कर्म कामदुक् Translation In the beginning of creation, the Lord of all creatures sent fourth generations of men and demigods, along with sacrifices for Vishnu, and blessed them by saying, "Be thou happy by this yagna sacrifice, because its performance will bestow upon you all desirable things." Verse 11 Devan Bhavayatanin ते देवा भावयन्तु वा परस्परं भावयन्ता श्रेयापरम् अवाप्स्यथा Translation The demigods being pleased by sacrifices will also please you, thus nourishing one another. There will reign general prosperity for all. Shri Prabhupada Ji, Praise Karmasana Gurudev Ji. Verse 12. इष्टान् भोगन् हि वो देवा दश्यन्ते यज्ञभाविता तैर्दतन् अप्रादेभौ यो भुङ्क्ते स्तेन एव स. Translation. In charge of the various necessities of life, the demigods, being satisfied with the performance of yajna, supply all necessities to men, but he who enjoys these gifts without offering them to the demigods in return is certainly a thief. Hare Krishna Jai Shri Prabhupada Jai Praise Karma Sanat Gurudev Ji. All glories to His Praise Karma Sanat Gurudev Ji. All glories to Shri Prabhupada. All glories to Shri Prabhupada. All glories to His Praise Karma Sanat Gurudev Ji. Please, if I commit any offense and mistake, please forgive me. Hare Krishna to all assembled devotees.
Krishna Mataji, am I audible? Am I audible, Mataji?
Yes, yes, Mataji.
Oh, okay, okay. Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna Gurudev Pranam Jai Shri Prabhupada. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Ram Hare Hare. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Grace Karan Saskrate, all glories to His Grace Karan Saskrate, all glories to His Grace Karan Saskrate. I'm sorry if background noises आता है तो so Bhagavad Gita text chapter 3 text 13 यज्ञशिष्टान शांतो मोयन्ते सर्व की सह भुजन्ते तब अगम पपा ये पच्यन्ते आत्मकरणत. Translation by His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The devotees of the Lord are released from all kinds of sin because they eat food which is offered first for sacrifice. Others who prepare food for personal sense enjoyment rarely eat only sin. Text 14. Anabhavanti bhutani prapnyande anasambhava yajna bhavati parjanyo yajna karma sambhudva. Translation by His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All living bodies subsist on food grains which are produced from rains. Rains are produced by performance of yajna, and yajna is one of prescribed duties. Purport by His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Baldeva Vidyabhushana, a great commentator on Bhagavad Gita, write as follows: Ye Indrai Agnantastavasthitam Yajna Sarveshram Vishnu Bhiracharya Tashetam Asnati Tena Tadha Yantram Sampadyanti Te Santah Sarvissa Bhaktaha Sarva Kilivir Andi Kala Vidher Atmanubhava Prakti Bandhake Nikihe Papir Vimuchante. The Supreme Lord, who is known as the Yagna Purusha or the personal beneficiary of all sacrifices, is the master of all demigods who serve him as the different limbs of the body serve the whole. Demigods like Indra, Chandra, Varuna, etc. are important officers who manage material affairs, and the Veda direct sacrifice to satisfy these demigods so that they may be pleased to supply air, light, and water sufficiently produce food grains. When Lord Krishna is worshipped, the demigods who are different limbs of the Lord are also automatically worshipped. Therefore, there is no separate need to worship the demigods. For this reason, the devotees of the Lord who are one second. Yes. So, who are in Krishna consciousness offer food to Krishna and then eat, a process which nourishes the body spiritually. By such action, not only a past sinful action, the body vanished, but the body become immunized to all contamination of material nature. When there is an epidemic disease, an antiseptic vaccine protects a person from the attack of such an epidemic. Similarly, food offered to Lord Vishnu and then taken by us make us sufficiently resistant to material affection, and one who is accustomed to this practice is called a devotee of the Lord. Therefore, a person in Krishna consciousness who eats only food offered to Krishna can counteract all the action of past material infections, which are impediments to the progress of self-realization. On the other hand, one who does not do so continues to increase the volume of sinful action, and this prepares the next body to resemble hogs and dogs to suffer the resultant reaction of all sins. The material world is full of contaminations, and one who is immune by accepting prasadam of the Lord, food offered to Vishnu, is saved from the attack, whereas one who does not do so becomes subjected to contamination. Food grains or vegetables are factually eatables. Human being eats different kinds of food grains, vegetables, fruits, etc. And the animals eat the refuse of the food grains and vegetables, grass, plants, etc. Humans being who are accustomed to eating meat and flesh must also depend on the production of vegetation in order to eat the animals. Therefore, ultimately, we have to depend on the production of the field and not on the production of brick factories. The field production is due to sufficient rain from the sky, and such rains are controlled by demigods like Indra, sun, moon, etc. And they are all servants of the Lord. The Lord can be satisfied by sacrifices. Therefore, one who cannot perform them will find himself in scarcity. That is the law of nature. Yajna, specifically the Sankirtana Yajna, prescribed for this age, must therefore be performed to save us at least from the scarcity of food supply. Text 50. कर्म ब्रह्मोद्भवं विद्धि ब्रह्मशक्रसम्भूतः तस्मत् सर्वोगतं ब्रह्म नित्यं यजने प्रतिष्ठितम्. Translation by Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Regulated activities are prescribed in the Vedas, and the Vedas are directly manifested from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Consequently, the all-pervading transcendence is eternally situated in acts of sacrifice. Text 16. एवं पवित्रं कौ चक्रं ननुवत्रतिहर्यः अघारुरिन्द्रारामो मोघं पर्थवा स जीवति. Translation by His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. My dear Arjuna, a man who does not follow this prescribed Vedic system of sacrifice certainly leads a life of sin. For a person delightfully only in the senses lives in vain. Text 17. यस्तत्त्व आत्मरोतेरेव स यत् आत्मतृप्तस्तमन्वः आत्मेन एव च सनुतस्तस्य कर्मा न विद्यते. Translation by His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. One who is, however, taking pleasure in the self, who is illuminated in the self, who rejoices in and is satisfied with the self only, fully satisfied, for him there is no duty. Text 18. नैव तस्य कृतेन हतो न कृतेन कश्चन न चस्य सर्वभूतेषु कश्चिद् अव्यपरिसः. Translation by His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. A self-realized man has no purpose to fulfill in the discharge of his prescribed duties, nor has he any reason not to perform such work, nor has he any need to depend on any other living being. Text 19. तस्मद् अस्तकः सततं कर्म कर्म संचर अस्तुखे अपचरण कर्म परमप्नोति पुरुषः. Translation by His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Therefore, without being attached to the fruits of activities, one should act as a matter of duty, not by working without attachment. One attains the Supreme. Text 20. कर्मणैव हि संहितम् अस्ति जानक्तः वः लोकसङ्ग्रम एव पुपि संपस्यं कर्तुम् अर्हसि. Translation by His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Even kings like Janaka and others attain the perfection stage by performance of prescribed duties. Therefore, just for the sake of educating the people in general, you should perform your work. Text 21. यद्यद् अचिराति श्रेष्ठास्तत्तत् एव रतो जनः सा यत् प्रप्नं कुरुते लोका तद् अनुवर्तते. Translation by His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Whatever action is performed by a great man, common men follow in his footsteps. And whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. People in general always require a leader who can teach the public by practical behavior. A leader cannot teach the public to stop smoking if he himself smokes. Lord Chaitanya said that the teacher should behave properly even before he begins teaching. One who teaches in that way is called acharya or the ideal teacher. Therefore, teacher must follow the principles of shastra, scripture, to reach the common man. The teacher cannot manufacture rules against the principle of revealed scriptures. So the revealed scriptures like Manusmritaha and similar others are considered the standard books to be followed by human society. Thus, the leader's teaching should be based on the principle of the standard truth as they are practiced by the great teachers. The Srimad Bhagavatam also affirms that one should follow in the footsteps of great devotees, and that is the way of progress on the path of spiritual realization. The king or the executive head of state, the father, and the school teacher are also considered to be natural leaders of the innocent people in general. All such natural leaders have a great responsibility to their dependents. Therefore, they must have conversant with standard books of moral and spiritual codes. Text 22. नामे प्रत्यहस्ति कर्तव्यं त्रिषु लोकेषु किञ्चन न पत्तम् अपपत्तव्यं कर्ता एव च कर्मणि. Translation by His Divine Grace is Siddhanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. O son of Pratha, there is no work prescribed for me within all three planetary systems, nor am I in want of anything, nor have I need to obtain anything, and yet I am engaged in work. Text 23. यद्हे अहं न वर्त्यायं जतु कर्मे अन्द्रितः मम वर्तमानवन्ते मनुष्यस्य वर्तः सर्वेशः. Translation by His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. For if I did not engage in work, O Pratha, certainly all men should follow my path. Text 24. उत्तिदिर्षर इमे लोका न कुर्मे कर्म चेदहम् संक्रस्य न कर्तश्यम उपहन्यम इप्नः परपः. Translation by His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. If I should cease to work, then all these words should be put to renunciation. I would also be the cause of creating unwanted population, and I would therefore destroy the peace of all sentient beings. Text 25. सक्तः कर्मण्य अविद्यमसो यथा कुर्वति भारत कुर्याद् तथा सक्तश्चिक्षीर्लोकसङ्ग्रहम्. Translation by His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. As the ignorant perform their duties with attachment to results, similarly, the learned may also act, but without attachment, for the sake of leading people on the right path. Text 26. Na buddhi bhedam janyat ajnayam karma sanganam josya sarva karmani vidvan yukta samcharan. Translation by His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Let not the wise disrupt the minds of the ignorant who are attached to fruitive action. They should not be encouraged to refrain from work, but to engage in work in the spirit of devotion. Text 27. प्रत्यह कर्मयमननि गुणैः कर्माणि सर्वः अहंकार विभूतात्मा कर्तहम् इति मन्यते. Translation by His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The bewildered spirit soul, under the influence of the three modes of material nature, thinks himself to be the doer of activities which are actually carried out by nature. Purport by His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Two persons, one in Krishna consciousness and then the other in material consciousness, working on same level, may appear to be working on the same platform, but there is a wide gulf of difference in their respective positions. The person in material consciousness is convinced by false ego that he is the doer of everything. He does not know that the mechanism of the body is produced by material nature, which works under the supervision of the Supreme Lord. The materialistic person has no knowledge that ultimately, the person in false ego takes all credit for doing everything independently, and that is the symptom of his nescience. He does not know that this gross and subtle body is the creation of material nature under the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And as such, his bodily and mental activity should be engaged in the service of Krishna. In Krishna consciousness, the ignorant man forgets that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is known as Rishikesha, or as the master of the senses of the material body. But due to this long misuse of the senses in sense gratification. He is factually bewildered by the false ego, which makes him forget his eternal relationship with Krishna. Text 28. Tatve tu mahabaho guna karma vibhagayo guna guneshu vartananta iti matmana sajjate. Translation by His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. One who is in knowledge of the absolute truth, Almighty Arm, does not engage himself in the senses and sense gratification, knowing well the difference between work in devotion and work for fruitive results. Text 29. Praktera guna sambhuta sajanta guna karmasu tanna kranda vidumadan kritsnan vena vichlate. Translation by His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Bewildered by the modes of material nature, the ignorant fully engage themselves in material activities and become attached, but the wise should not unsettle them. Although these duties are inferior to the performance, lack of knowledge. Text 30. Maya sarvani karmani sannhastatma cetasa nirsari niramam bhutva yudyasva vigata jarvaha. Translation by His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Therefore, O Arjuna, surrendering all your work onto me, with mind intent on me, and without desire for gain, and free from egoism and lethargy fight. Text 31. Ye mammatam idam nityam anustistanti manvaha shraddhantavo na suyanto muchante pi karma bhe. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. One who executes his duty according to my injunction and who follows this teaching faithfully without envy become free from the bondage of fruitive actions. Text 32. Yeta Veda Abhitasto Nantusthati me matam Sarvagyana Vibhutastam Vidhinastan Achestaha. Translation by His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. But those who, out of envy, discredit this teaching and do not practice them regularly are to be considered very fit of all knowledge, be fooled, and doomed to ignorance and bondage. Text 33. सद्रंस्तं चेष्ट सव्यसः पक्त्रैर्ज्ञानवन्पपि प्रक्तिरम्यति भूतानि निग्रह किं करिष्यति. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Even a man of knowledge acts according to his own nature, for everyone follows his nature. What can depression accomplish? Text 34. इन्द्रायस्तेन्द्रस्थे रागादेवषु व्यवस्थितौ तयोर्नवसमगच्छेत् तौ है अस्य परिहन्तुम्. Translation by Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Attraction and repulsion for sense objects are felt by embodied beings, but one should not fall under the control of senses and sense objects because they are stumbling blocks on the path of self-realization. Text 35. Shreyan sarva dharmo vikna paradharmat savanasthita swadharme nidhamam shreya paradharmo bhavayat. Translation by His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. It is far better to discharge one's prescribed duties, even though they may be faulty, than another's duty. Destruction in the course of performing one's own duty is better than engaging in another's duty, for to follow another's path is dangerous. Text 36. Arjuna vacha atha kena prakyutyam papam chatrari purushaha anicam api varshaya val eva niyojataha. Translation by His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. A living entity as part and parcel. Sorry. Translation by His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Arjuna said, O descendant of Vrishni, by what is one impelled to sinful acts, even unwillingly, as if engaged by force? Text 37. Shri Bhagavan Kamesha Krodha Esha Rajguna Sambhuda Bhava Mahasano Mahapapma Vidhyayenam Iha Variram. Translation by His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The Blessed Lord said, It is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material modes of passion and later transform into wrath, and which is all the devouring sinful enemy of this world. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. When a living entity comes in contact with the material creation, his eternal love for Krishna transformed into lust in association with the mode of passion. Or in other words, the sense of love of God becomes transformed into lust as milk in contact with the sour tamarind transformed into yogurt. Then again, when lust is unsatisfied, it turns into wrath. Wrath is transformed into illusion, and illusion continues its material existence. Therefore, lust is the greatest enemy of the living entity, and it is the lust only which induces the pure living entity to remain entangled in the material world. Wrath is the manifestation of the mode of ignorance. These modes exhibit themselves as wrath and other corollaries. If therefore the modes of passion, instead of being degraded into modes of ignorance, are elevated to the modes of goodness by the prescribed method of living and acting, then one can be saved from the degradation of wrath by spiritual attachment. The Supreme Personality of Godhead expanded himself into many for his ever increasing spiritual bliss, and the living entities are parts and parcel of this spiritual bliss. They also have partial independence, but by misuse of the independence, when the service attitude is transformed into the propensity of sense enjoyment, they come under the sway of lust. This material creation is created by the Lord to give a facility to the all conditioned soul to fulfill those lustful propensities. And when they are completely baffled by prognon lustful activities, the living entities begin to inquire about their real position. The inquiry is the beginning of the Vedanta Sutra, wherein it is said, Atoto Brahma Jikyasa. One should inquire into the Supreme, and the Supreme is defined in Srimad Bhagavatam as Janmadasya Yato Navyat Itrasta Cha, or the origin of everything is the Supreme Brahman. Therefore, the origin of lust is also in the Supreme. If there was, therefore, lust is transformed into love for the Supreme or transformed into Krishna consciousness, or in other words, desiring everything for Krishna, then both lust and wrath can be spiritualized. Hanuman, the great servitor of Lord Rama, engaged his wrath upon his enemies for the satisfaction of the Lord. Therefore, lust and wrath, when they are employed in Krishna consciousness, become a friend instead of our enemies. Uh, yes. Text 38. Dhum Dhumentriyate Vahir Yatha Drasso Malena Cha Yatrodin Ratav Garbhas Tatha Tindam Avratam. Translation by His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. As fire is covered by smoke, as a mirror is covered by dust, or as the embryo is covered by the womb, similarly, the living entity is covered by different degrees of this lust. Text 39. Avratam jnanam etana jnanina nityavirinna kama srupena konteya duspir duspera naninacha. Translation by His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Thus, a man's pure consciousness is covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. Text 40. इन्द्रायीमनुभूतिर् अस्त्यस्ति स्तनम् उच्यते एतर्विमोदत्स एषा ज्ञानम् अवृतदेहिनाम्. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting place of this lust, which wields the real knowledge of the living entity and biblicism. Uh, Thank you so much, Gurudev, for giving me this chance. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm really sorry अगर background में noise आए हो तो. पांचकत्वस्य कृष्णदेवच पतितनां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to His divine, all glories to His grace, Karan Stas Gurudev, all glories to His grace, Karan Stas Gurudev, all glories to His grace, Karan Stas Gurudev.
Hare Krishna everyone, Jai Srila Prabhupada, Jai Sri Gauranga Sundar Gurudev. Am I audible? Mataji, am I audible?
Yes, yes, Prabhuji, you're audible. Please continue.
So it was text 41, na? Mataji, it was text 41, na? Can anyone confirm? Okay, Mataji, thank you. So, तस्मात् त्वम् इन्द्रियाणि आदौ नियम भरतर्षभ पापमानं प्रजहीनं ज्ञान विज्ञान नाशनम्. Translation. Therefore, O Arjun, best of the Bharatas, in the very beginning, curb this great symbol of sin, lust, by regulating the senses and slay this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. Text 42. Indriyani nani ahur indriyebhya param mana. Manasastu para buddhir yo buddhe paratastu saha. Translation. The working senses are superior to dull matter. Mind is higher than the senses. Intelligence is still higher than the mind, and the soul, is even higher than the intelligence. Text 43. एवं बुद्धि परम बुद्ध्वा संसत्त्वात्मा आत्मना जाहि शत्रुम महाबाहो काम रूपम दुरासदम. Thus, knowing oneself to be transcendental to material senses, mind, and intelligence, one should control the lower self by the higher self, and thus by spiritual strength conquer the insatiable enemy known as lust. Now, chapter 4, text 1. Sri Bhagwan Uvach. Imam vivasvate yogam proktavan aham avyayam vivasvan manave praha manur ikshvakave bravit. The blessed Lord said, I instructed this imperishable science of yoga to the sun god Vivaswan, and Vivaswan instructed it to Manu, the father of mankind, and Manu in turn instructed it to Ikshvaku. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Herein we find the history of the Bhagavad Gita, traced from a remote time when it was delivered to the royal order, the kings of all planets. This science is especially meant for the protection of the inhabitants, and therefore the royal order should understand it in order to be able to rule the citizens and protect them from the material bondage to lust. Human life is meant for cultivation of spiritual knowledge in eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the executive heads of all states and all planets are obliged to impart this lesson to the citizens by education, culture, and devotion. In other words, the executive heads of all states are intended to spread the science of Krishna consciousness so that the people may take advantage of this great science and pursue a successful path, utilizing the opportunity of the human form of life. In this millennium, the sun god is known as Vivaswan, the king of the sun, which is the origin of all planets within the solar system. In the Brahma Samhita, it is stated, Yat chakshur esa savita sakala grahanam raja samasta sura murtir ashesha teja yasyagya brahmati samritva kalachakro govindam adi purusham tamaham bhajami. Let me worship. Lord Brahma said, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda, Krishna, who is the original person and under whose order the sun, which is the king of all planets, is assuming immense power and heat. The sun represents the eye of the Lord and traverses its orbit in obedience to his order. The sun is the king of the planets, and the sun god, at present of the name Vivaswan, rules the sun planet, which is controlling all other planets by supplying heat and light. He is rotating under the order of Krishna, and Lord Krishna originally made Vivaswan his first disciple to understand the science of Bhagavad Gita. The Gita is not, therefore, a speculative treatise for the insignificant mundane scholar, but is a standard book of knowledge coming down from time immemorial. In the Mahabharata Shanti Parva 348.51 to 52, we can trace out the history of the Gita as follows. त्रेता युगादौ च ततो विवस्वान् मनवे ददौ मनुश्च लोकभृति अर्थं सुतायक्षवाक्वे ददौ इक्ष्वाकुना च कथितो व्याप्य लोकन avastita. In the beginning of the Treta Yuga millennium, this science of the relationship delivered to Vivaswan by to Manu. Manu, being the father of mankind, gave it to his son Maharaj Ikshvaku, the king of this earth planet and forefather of the Raghu dynasty in which Lord Ramachandra appeared. Therefore, Bhagavad Gita existed in the human society from the time of Maharaj Ikshvaku. At the present moment, we have just passed through 5,000 years of the Kali Yuga, which lasts 432,000 years. Before this, there was Dwapar Yuga, 800,000 years, and before that, there was Treta Yuga, 1,200,000 years. Thus, some 2,005,000 years ago, Manu spoke the Bhagavad Gita to his disciple and son, Maharaj Ikshvaku, the king of this planet, Earth. The age of the current Manu is calculated to last some 305,300,000 years, of which 120,400,000 years have passed. Accepting that before the birth of Manu, the Gita was spoken by the Lord to his disciple, the sun god Vivaswan, a rough estimate is that the Gita was spoken at least 120,400,000 years ago, and in the human society, it has been extant for 2 million years. It was respoken by the Lord again to Arjun about 5,000 years ago. That is the rough estimate of the history of the Gita. According to the Gita itself and according to the version of the speaker, Lord Sri Krishna, it was spoken to the sun god Vivaswan because he is also a Kshatriya and is the father of all Kshatriyas who are descendants of the sun god or the Surya Vamsha Kshatriyas. Because Bhagavad Gita is as good as the Vedas, being spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this knowledge is apurushya, superhuman. Since the Vedic instructions are accepted as they are without human interpretation, the Gita must therefore be accepted without mundane interpretation. The mundane wranglers may speculate on the Gita in their own ways, but that is not Bhagavad Gita as it is. Therefore, Bhagavad Gita has to be accepted as it is from the disciplic succession, and it is described herein that the Lord spoke it to the sun god. The sun god spoke to his son Manu, and Manu spoke to his son Ikshvaku. Text number 2. एवं परंपरा प्राप्तम इमं राजर्षय विदु स कालनेह महता yoga nashta parantapa. Translation: This supreme science was thus received through the chain of disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. But in course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science as it is appears to be lost. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. It is clearly stated that the Gita was especially meant for the saintly kings because they were to execute its purpose in ruling over the citizens. Certainly, Bhagavad Gita was never meant for the demonic persons who would dissipate its value for no one's benefit and would devise all types of interpretation according to personal whims. As soon as the original purpose was scattered by the motives of the unscrupulous commentators, there arose the need to re-establish the disciplic succession. 5,000 years ago, it was detected by the Lord himself that the disciplic succession was broken, and therefore he declared that the purpose of the Gita appeared to be lost. In the same way, at the present moment also, there are so many editions of the Gita, especially in English, but almost all of them are not according to authorized disciplic succession. These are innumerable interpretations rendered by different mundane scholars, but almost all of them do not accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, although they make a good business on the words of Sri Krishna. This spirit is demonic because demons do not believe in God but simply enjoy the property of the Supreme. Since there is a great need of an edition of the Gita in English, as it is received by the Parampara disciplic succession system, an attempt is made herewith to fulfill this great want. Bhagavad Gita, accepted as it is a great boon to humanity because if it is accepted as a treatise of philosophical speculations, it is simply a waste of time. 4.3, text 3. Sa evayam mayatedya yoga prokta puratana bhakto se me sakha cheti rahasyam hi etad uttamam. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. That very ancient science of the relationship with the Supreme is today told by me to you, because you are my devotee as well as my friend. Therefore, you can understand the transcendental mystery of this science. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. These are two classes of men. There are two classes of men, namely the devotee and the demon. The Lord selected Arjun as the recipient of this great science owing to his becoming the devotee of the Lord. But for the demon, it is not possible to understand this great mysterious science. There are a number of editions of this great book of knowledge, and some of them have commentaries by the devotees, and some of them have commentaries by the demons. Commentation by the devotees is real, whereas that of the demons is useless. Arjun accepts Sri Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and any commentary on the Gita following in the footsteps of Arjun is real devotional service to the cause of this great science. The demonic, however, concoct something about Krishna and mislead the public and general readers from the path of Krishna's instructions. One should try to follow the disciplic succession from Arjun and thus be benefited. Text number 4. Arjun Uvach. अपरं भवतो जन्म परं जन्म विवस्वत कथम एतद् विज्ञानीयं त्वम् आदौ प्रोक्तवान् इति. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Arjun said, the sun god Vivaswan is senior by birth to you. How am I to understand that in the beginning you instructed this science to him? Text number 5. Shri Bhagwan Uvach. Bahuni me vyatitani janmani tava charjuna. Tani aham veda sarvani natvam veda parantapa. Translation. The blessed Lord said, many, many births, both you and I have passed. I can remember all of them, but you cannot, O subduer of the enemy. Text number 6. Ajopi san avyatyatma bhutanam ishwaropi san. Prakritim swam adhistaya sambhavami atma mayaya. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Although I am unborn and my transcendental body never deteriorates, and although I am the Lord of all sentient beings, I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Lord has spoken about the peculiarity of his birth. Although he may appear like an ordinary person, he remembers everything of his many, many past births, whereas a common man cannot remember what he has done even a few hours before. If someone is asked what he did exactly at the same time one day earlier, it would be very difficult for a common man to answer immediately. He would surely have to dredge his memory to recall what he was doing exactly at the same time one day before. And yet, men often dare claim to be God or Krishna. One should not be misled by such meaningless claims. Then again, the Lord explains his Prakriti or his form. Prakriti means nature as well as Swarupa, or one's own form. The Lord says that he appears in his own body. He does not change his body, as the common living entity changes from one body to another. The conditioned soul may have one kind of body in the present birth, but he has a different body in the next birth. In the material world, the living entity has no fixed body but transmigrates from one body to another. The Lord, however, does not do so. Whenever he appears, he does so in the same original body by his internal potency. In other words, Krishna appears in this material world in his original eternal form with two hands holding a flute. He appears exactly in his eternal body, uncontaminated by this material world. Although he appears in the same transcendental body and is Lord of this universe, it still appears that he takes his birth like an ordinary living entity. Despite the fact Lord Krishna grows from childhood to boyhood and from boyhood to youth, astonishingly enough, he never ages beyond youth. At the time of the Battle of Kurukshetra, he had many grandchildren at home, or in other words, he had sufficiently aged by material calculations. Still, he looked just like a young man, 20 or 25 years old. We never see a picture of Krishna in old age because he never grows old like us. Although he is the oldest person in the whole creation, past, present, and future, neither his body nor his intelligence ever deteriorates or changes. Therefore, it is clear that in spite of his being in the material world, he is the same unborn, eternal form of bliss and knowledge, changes in his transcendental body and intelligence. Factually, his appearance and disappearance is like the sun's rising, moving before us, and disappearing from our eyesight. When the sun is out of sight, we think that the sun is set. And when the sun is before our eyes, we think that the sun is on the horizon. Actually, the sun is always in its fixed position. But owing to the defective insufficiency of the sun in the sky, and because his appearance disappearance are completely different from that of any ordinary common living entity, it is evident that he is eternal, blissful, knowledge by his internal potency, and he is never contaminated by material nature. The Vedas also confirm that the Supreme Personality of God is unborn, yet he still appears to take his birth in multi manifestations. The Vedic supplementary literatures also confirm that even though the Lord appears to be taking his birth, he is still without change of body. In the Bhagavatam, he appears before his mother as Narayan with four hands and in decorations of the six kinds of full opulences. His appearance in his original eternal form is his causeless mercy. According to the Vishwakosha dictionary, the Lord is conscious of all of his previous appearances and disappearances. But a common living entity forgets everything about his past body as soon as he gets another body. He is the Lord of all living entities, and because he performs wonderful and superhuman activities while he is on this earth. Therefore, the Lord is always the same absolute truth and is without differentiation between his form and self or between his quality and quantity. A person may now be raised as to why the Lord appears and disappears in this world. This is explained in the next verse. Hare Krishna everyone, Jai Srila Prabhupada, Jai His Grace Gauranga Sundar Gurudev. Now the verse will be 4.7. The next devotee may speak. Thank you everyone. Vancha kalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindhu vyayavascha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah.
Am I audible? Am I audible, Mataji?
Yes, Mataji, audible.
Yes, Mataji. Chapter 3, Text 7. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanirvavati bharata abhyudhanam adharmasya tadat manam srijam yaham. Translation by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Whenever there is a decline in religious practice, O descendant of Bharata, and a predominant rise of irreligion at the time, I dissent myself. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The word Srijami is significant herein. Srijami cannot be used in the sense of creation because, according to the previous verse, there is no creation of the Lord's form or body. Since all of the forms are eternally existed, therefore Srijami means the Lord, that the Lord Him
नेटवर्क गया है क्या? हाँ जी, बहुत सही है आज। Let's see what happens.
Bhagavatam, it is stated that such principles are the laws of the Lord. Only the Lord can manufacture a system of religion. The Vedas are also accepted as originally spoken by the Lord Himself to Brahma.
परित्राणाय साधूनां विनाशाय च दुष्कृतां धर्म संस्थापनार्थं संभवामि युगे युगे। क्या हो रहा है? क्या हो रहा है?
Mataji, you're still not audible.
Now am I audible?
Yeah, you start, but then it goes away. The voice goes away only after like 10-15 seconds.
Okay, I'm opening the PDF from other phone.
I guess, Mataji, you have to stay in the meet. Otherwise, the voice gets lost. You have to stay.
Yes, Mataji. The Vedic principles push one towards complete surrender unto him, and whenever such principles are disturbed by the demonic, the Lord appears. From the Bhagavatam, we understand that Lord Buddha is the incarnation of Krishna who appeared when materialism was rampant and materialists were using the pretext of the authority of the Vedas. Although there are certain restrictive rules and regulations regarding animal sacrifice for particular purposes in the Vedas, people of demonic tendencies still took to animal sacrifice without reference to the Vedic principles. Lord Buddha appeared to stop this nonsense and to establish the Vedic principles of nonviolence. Therefore, each and every avatara or incarnation of the Lord has a particular mission, and they are all described in the revealed scriptures. No one should be accepted as an avatara unless he is referred to by scriptures. It is not a fact that the Lord appears only on Indian soil. He can advert himself and everywhere and wherever he desire to appear in each and every incarnation. He speaks as much about religion as can be understood by the particular people under their particular circumstances. But the mission is the same, to lead people to God consciousness and obedience to the principles of religion. Sometimes he descends personally, and sometimes he sends his bona fide representative in the form of his son or servant, or himself in some disguised form. The, the principles of the Bhagavad Gita were spoken to Arjuna, and for that matter to other highly elevated persons, because he was highly advanced compared to ordinary persons in other parts of the world. 2 plus 2 equals 4 is a mathematical principle that is true both in the beginners arithmetic class and in the advanced class as well. Still, there are higher and lower mathematics in all incarnations of the Lord. Therefore, the same principles are taught, but they appear to be higher and lower in varied circumstances. The higher principles of religion begin with the acceptance of the four orders and the four statuses of social life as well be explained later. The whole purpose of the mission of incarnations is to arouse Krishna consciousness everywhere. Such consciousness is manifest and non-manifest only under different circumstances. Thank you, Gurudev, for giving me the opportunity to speak. जय शिला प्रभुपादा जय ईश कृष्ण कांग्रेस सुंदरदास गुरुदेव वांशाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिंधु भैवच्च पतितनां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः.
स्टार्ट करना है. Okay, Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, Shloka number 9. Janma karma cha me divyam evam yo veti tatvah tvayakta deham punarjanmah neti mam iti so rojunah. Translation: one who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal adorn, O Arjuna. Text number 10. वितः रागभया क्रोधः मन्मया मम उपरिषतः भावो जानन तपाशः उत
mad bhavam agataha. Translation: being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me, and taking refuge in me. Many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attain transcendental love for me. Purport: as described above, it was very difficult for a person who is too materially affected to understand the personal nature of the Supreme Absolute Truth. Generally, people who are attached to the worldly conception of life are so absorbed in materialism that it is almost impossible for them to understand that there is a transcendental body which is imperishable, full of knowledge, and eternally blissful. In the materialistic concept, the body is perishable, full of ignorance, and completely miserable. Therefore, people in general keep this the same bodily idea in mind when they are informed of the personal form of the Lord. For such materialistic men, the form of genetic material manifestation is supreme. Consequently, they consider the supreme to be impersonal, and because they are too materially absorbed, the conception of retaining the personality after liberation from matter frightens them. When they are informed that spiritual life is also individual and personal, they become afraid of becoming persons again, and so they naturally prefer a kind of merging into the impersonal void. Generally, they compare the living entities to the bubbles of the ocean which merge into the ocean. That is the highest perfection of spiritual existence attainable without individual personality. This is kind of fearful stage of life devoid of perfect knowledge of a spiritual existence. Further of the devotional life is called a bhava or transcendental love of Godhead. According to the Bhakti Rasa Sindhu, the science of devotional service, adho shraddha tatha sadhu sangota bhajanah kriya तथो नारतः निवृत्ते सहित तथो निष्ठा रुचिस तथा अथासक्तिस्तथो भावस्तथा प्रेमभय प्रेम प्रेमाभयोदयश्चन्ति सदा सदाकनम् अयं प्रेमणः pradurбhave bhavet karma. In the beginning, one must have a preliminary desires for self-realization. This will bring one to the stage of trying to associate with persons who are spiritually elevated. In next stage, one becomes initiated by an elevated spiritual master, and under his instruction, the neophyte devotee begins the process of devotional service. The execution of devotional service under the guidance of a spiritual master, one becomes free from all material attachment, attains steadiness in self realization, and acquires a taste for hearing about the absolute personality of God or Shri Krishna. This stage leads one further forward to attachment for Krishna consciousness, which is matured in bhava or the preliminary stage of transcendental love of God. Real love for God is called a prema, the highest perfectional stage of life. In the prema stage, there is a constant engagement in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. So, by the slow process of devotional service under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, one can attain the highest stage, being free from all material attachment, from the fearfulness of one's individual spiritual personality, and from the frustrations resulting from void philosophy, then one can ultimately attain to the adobe of Supreme Lord. X11. Ye yatha man.
Mataji, did you read ninth text purport?
9. No, Mataji.
Please, can you go back and read that purport?
Vartanante Manushya Pratha Sarvasham. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. All of them, as they surrender unto me, I reward accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects, O son of Pritha. Purport: everyone is searching for Krishna in different aspects of his manifestations. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is partially realized in his impersonal Brahma Jyoti effulgence and as the all-pervading super soul dwelling within everything, including the particles of atoms. But Krishna is only fully realized by his pure devotees. Consequently, Krishna is the object of everyone's realization, and thus anyone and everyone is satisfied according to one's desire to have him. In the transcendental world also, Krishna reciprocates with his pure devotees in the transcendental attitude, just as the devotee wants him. One devotee may want Krishna as supreme master, another as his personal friend, another as his son and still another as his lover. Krishna rewards all the devotees equally according to their different intensities of love for him. In the material world, the same reciprocations of feeling are there, and they are equally exchanged by the Lord with the different types of worshippers. The pure devotees, both here and in the transcendental Adam, associate with him in person and are able to render personal service to the Lord, and thus derive transcendental bliss in his loving service. As for those who are impersonalists and who want to commit spiritual suicide by annihilating the individual existence of the living entity, Krishna helps also by absorbing them into his but to elevate men from the animal status. The above mentioned divisions are created by the Lord for the systematic development of Krishna consciousness. The tendency of a particular man toward work is determined the modes of material nature which he has to acquire. Such symptoms of life according to different modes of material nature are described in the 18th chapter of this book. A person in Krishna consciousness, however, is above even the Brahmanas because a Brahmana by quality is supposed to know about Brahman, the supreme absolute truth. Most of them approach the impersonal Brahman manifestation of Lord Krishna, but only a man who transcends the limited knowledge of a Brahmana and reaches the knowledge of the supreme personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna, become a person in Krishna consciousness, or in other words, a Vaishnava. Krishna consciousness includes knowledge of different planetary expansions of Krishna, namely Rama, Nrsimha, Vara, etc. However, as Krishna is transcendental to this system of the four divisions of human society, a person in Krishna consciousness is also transcendental to all divisions of human society, whether we consider the divisions of community, nation, or species. Text number 14. Namam karmani limpanti, name karma palehe spraha, iti mamyo bijananti, karma bhina so badyate. Translation: There is no work that affects me, nor do I aspire for the fruits of action. One who understands this truth about me also does not become entangled in the fruitive reactions of work. Text number 15. Ivam janatvaha kritam karma urvahir api mum mum. Next page. Text 20. Taya karta karma pralaseyanam nitya tarpa nirasya karmaya abhipartabhyutapapi nirva kinchit karoti sa. Next page. Translation: Abandoning all the attachments to the result of his activities, ever satisfied and independent, he performs the fruitive action, although engaged in all kind of undertakings. Next page. Text 21. Nirasarga yata chetvam taya karta sarva pregana sarvaram keshavam karma karvam napati kilambhishyam. Next page. Translation: Such man of understanding act with the mind and intelligence perfectly controlled, give up all sense of propriety all over his possession and act only for the bare necessities of life, thus working. He is not affected by sinful reaction. Thank you so much, Mataji. Hare Krishna, Jai Srila Prabhupada, Jai Guru Ranga Sangha, Jai Maharaj.
Hare Krishna, Jai Shri Prabhupada, Jai Gauranga Sundar Gurudev. Text 22, right?
Yes, Mataji.
Okay. Reading from Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 4, text 22. Yadricha labha santushto dvandvatito vimatsarah samah siddhava cha kritvapi na nibhadyate. Translation by His Divine Grace is A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. He who is satisfied with gain which comes of its own accord, who is free from duality and does not envy, who is steady both in success and failure, is never entangled, although performing actions. Text 23. Gata sangasya muktasya ज्ञानानवस्थित चेतसः यज्ञाया चरतः कर्म समग्रम प्रविल्यते. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. The work of a man who is unattached to the modes of material nature and who is fully situated in transcendental knowledge merges entirely into transcendence. Text 24. ब्रह्मार अर्पण ब्रह्म हवै ब्रह्माग्नौ ब्रह्मणा हुतं ब्रह्मैव तेन गन्तव्यं ब्रह्मा कर्म समाधिना. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. A person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because of his full contribution to spiritual activities, in which the consummation is absolute and that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature. Text 25. Devam evapare yagyam योगिनः पर्युपासते ब्रह्माग्नैव आपरे यज्ञैनैव पजुह्वति. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Some yogis perfectly worship the demigods by offering different sacrifices to them, and some of them offer sacrifices in the fire of the Supreme Brahman. Text 26. श्रोत्रादीनीन्द्रियाण्यन्ये संयमाग्निषु जुह्वति शब्दादीन्विषयानन्य इन्द्रियाग्निषु जुह्वति. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Some of them sacrifice the hearing process and the senses in the fire of the controlled mind, and others sacrifice the objects of the senses, such as sound, in the fire of sacrifice. Text 27. सर्वाणि इंद्रिय कर्माणि प्राण कर्माणि चापरे आत्मसंयम योगाग्नो जुवति ज्ञानी दीपते. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Those who are interested in self-realization in terms of mind and sense control offer the functions of all the senses as well as the vital force breath as oblations into the fire of the controlled mind. Text 28. Dravya yagyast tapo yagya yoga yagyast thapre swadhyaya yagyascha yatayah sanchit vratah. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. There are others who, enlightened by sacrificing their material possessions in severe austerities, take strict vows and practice the yoga of eightfold mysticism, and others study the Vedas for the advancement of transcendental knowledge. Text 29. Apane juvati pranam pranam prane panam tathapare प्राणापान गति रुद्वा प्राणायाम परायणः अपरे नियताराः प्राणेषु जुह्वति. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. And there are even others who are inclined to the process of breath restraint to remain in trance, and they practice stopping the movement of the outgoing breath into the incoming and incoming breath into the outgoing, and thus at last remain in trance, stopping all breathing. Some of them, curtailing the eating process, offer the outgoing breath into itself as a sacrifice. Text 30. Sarvepya ete yagya vido yagyakshiprya Shpita Kalmashaha Yagya Shishtamrit Bhujo Yanti Brahma Sanatanam. Translation by His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. All these performers who know the meaning of sacrifice become cleansed of sinful reaction, and having tasted the nectar of the remnants of such sacrifice, they go to the supreme eternal atmosphere. Text 31. Nayam lokostya ayagyasya kutonya kurusatamah. Kurusatam. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. O best of the Kuru dynasty, without sacrifice, one can never live happily on this planet or in this life. What then of the next? Text 32. Evam बहुविधा यज्ञा वितता ब्रह्मणो मुखे कर्म जान विधि तान्व सर्वानेवम ज्ञात्वा विमोक्षसे. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. All these different types of sacrifice are approved by the Vedas, and all of them are born of different types of work. Knowing them as such, you will become liberated. Text 33. श्रेयान् द्रव्यमयाद् यज्ञात् ज्ञान यज्ञ परन्तप सर्वकर्माखिलं पार्थ ज्ञाने परिसमाप्यते. Translation by His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. O chastiser of the enemy, the sacrifice of knowledge is greater than the sacrifice of material possessions. O son of Pritha, after all, the sacrifice of work culminates in transcendental knowledge. Text 34. तद्विद्धि प्रणिपातेन प्रणिप्रश्नेन सेवया उपेदक्षन्ति ते ज्ञानम ज्ञानिनास्तत्व दर्शनम. Translation purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master, inquire from him submissively, and render service unto him. The self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you because he has seen the truth. Purport. The path of spiritual realization is undoubtedly difficult. The Lord therefore advises us to approach a bona fide spiritual master in the line of disciplic succession from the Lord Himself. No one can be a bona fide spiritual master without following this principle of disciplic succession. The Lord is the original spiritual master, and a person in the disciplic succession can convey the message of the Lord as it is to his disciple. No one can be spiritually realized by manufacturing his own process, as is the fashion of the foolish pretenders. The Bhagavatam says, Dharman hi sakshat bhagavad pranitam. The path of religion is directly enunciated by the Lord. Therefore, mental speculation or dry arguments cannot help one progress in spiritual life. One has to approach a bona fide spiritual master to receive the knowledge. Such a spiritual master should be accepted in full surrender, and one should serve the spiritual master like a menial servant without false prestige. Satisfaction of the self-realized spiritual master is the secret of advancement in spiritual life. Inquiries and submission constitute the proper combination for spiritual understanding. Unless there is submission and service, inquiries from the learned spiritual master will not be effective. One must be able to pass the test of the spiritual master, and when he sees the genuine desire of the disciple, he automatically blesses the disciple with genuine spiritual understanding. In this verse, both blind following and absurd inquiries are condemned. One should not only hear submissively from the spiritual master, but one must also get a clear understanding from him. In submission and service and inquiries, A bona fide spiritual master is by nature very kind toward the disciple. Therefore, when the student is submissive and is always ready to render service, the reciprocation of knowledge and inquiries becomes perfect. Text 35. Yagyatva na punarmoham evam yasyasi pandava येन भूतान्ये शेषाणि द्रक्ष्यस्य आत्मन्य अथोमयि. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. And when you have thus learned the truth, you will know that all living beings are but part of me, and that they are in me and are mine. Text 36. Api chedasi papebhyah sarvebhyah pap kritamah sarvam jnanaplavenaiv vrijinam santarashyasi. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Even if you are considered to be the most sinful of all sinners, when you are situated in the boat of transcendental knowledge, you will be able to cross over the ocean of miseries. Text 37. Yathai dhansi samidhognir भस्मसात् कुरुतेर्जुना ज्ञानाग्नेः सर्वकर्माणि भस्मसात् कुरुते तथा. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. As the blazing fire turns firewood to ashes, O Arjun, so does the fire of knowledge burn to ashes all reactions to material activities. Text 38. न हि ज्ञानेन सदृशं पवित्रम इह विद्यते तत्व स्वयं योग संसिद्ध कालेनात्मनि विन्दति. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. In this world, there is nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. Such knowledge is the mature fruit of all mysticism, and one who has achieved this enjoys the self within himself in due course of time. Text 39. श्रद्धावान लभते ज्ञानम तत्पर संयतेनेन्द्रिय ज्ञानम लब्ध्वा परम शांतिम achirenadhigachati. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. A faithful man who is absorbed in transcendental knowledge and who subdues his senses quickly attains the supreme spiritual peace. Text 40. अज्ञश्चाश्रद्धाधनाश्च संस्यात्मा विनश्यति नायम लोकोस्ति न परो सुखम संशयात्मनः. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. But ignorant and faithless persons who doubt the revealed scriptures do not attain God consciousness. For the doubting soul, there is happiness neither in this world nor in the next. Text 41. Yoga sanyasta karmanam jnana sanshayam atmavantam na karmani nibandhanti dhananjay. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Therefore, one who has renounced the fruits of his action, whose doubts are destroyed by transcendental knowledge, and who is situated firmly in the self, is not bound by works, O conqueror of riches. Text 42. Tasmad ajnana sambhutam hritstham ज्ञानान् सिनात्मनः चित्वैनं संशयं योगमातिष्ठोत्तिष्ठ भारत. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, or glories to Srila Prabhupada, or glories to Srila Prabhupada, or glories to Srila Prabhupada. Therefore, the doubts which have arisen in your heart out of ignorance should be slashed by the weapon of knowledge. Armed with yoga, O Bharata, stand and fight. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports to the fourth chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of transcendental knowledge. Someone can come and start with chapter 5, first text.
Hare Krishna Mataji, yes Mataji. नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णकृष्णा भूतले श्रीमद् भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिनीति नमिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे उमज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानञ्जनशलाकय अक्षरक्षुण्यतनेन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरुन् वैष्णवांश श्रीरूपं साकेजातं सागरा रघुनाथान्वितं सात्वैतं साधुतं हृजनसहितं श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य देवं श्री राधा कृष्ण पदांस ललिता श्री विशाखावितांश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीन बंधु जगतपते गोपेशा गोपिका कांता राधा कांता नमस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छकल्पतरुभाष्यस्य कृपा सिन्धुभ्यः एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे राम हरे 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 कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे राम हरे हरे All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to His Grace Gauranga Sundardas Gurudev Ji, all glories to His Grace Gauranga Sundardas Gurudev Ji, all glories to His Grace Gauranga Sundardas Gurudev Ji, all glories to sample devotees. Bhagavad Gita as it is by Srila Prabhupada, Chapter 5, Karma Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness, Text 1. अर्जुन उवाच संन्यासं कर्मणां कृष्ण पुनर्योगं च संससि यच्छ्रेय एतयोः एकं तन्मे ब्रूहि सुनिश्चितम्. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Jai Srila Prabhupada. Arjun said, O Krishna, first of all you ask me to renounce work and then again you recommend work with devotion. Now will you kindly tell me definitely which of the two is more beneficial? Text 2. श्रीभगवान् उवाच संन्यासकर्मयोगश्च निःश्रेयः उभौ तयोस्तु कर्मसन्न्यासात् कर्मयोगो विषीयते. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. The Blessed Lord said, the renunciation of work and work in devotion are both good for liberation. But of the two, work in devotional service is better than renunciation of work. Text 3. ज्ञेय स नित्य सन्यासी यो न द्वेष्टि न कांक्षति निर्द्वंद्वो हि महाबाहो सुखम बंधात् प्रमुच्यते. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. One who neither hates nor desires the fruits of his activities is known to be always renounced. Such a person, liberated from all dualities, easily overcome material bondage and is completely liberated. O mighty armed Arjun. Text 4. साङ्ख्ययोगौ प्रगबाल वदन्ति न पण्डित प्रदवन्ति न पण्डित एकम् अपि अस्ति सम्यक् उभयोर्विन्दते फलम्. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Only the ignorant speak of karma yoga and devotional service as being different from the analytical study of the material world. Those who are actually learned say that he who applies himself well into one of these paths achieves the result of both. Text 5. Yad sankhye prapyate sthanam yad yoget अधिगम्यते ekam sankyam cha yogam cha ya pashyati sa pashyati. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Jai Srila Prabhupada. One who knows that the position reached by means of renunciation can also be attained by works in devotional service, and who therefore sees that the path of works and the path of renunciation are one, sees things as they are. Text 6. संन्यासस्तु महाबाहो दुःखम् आप्तुम् अयोगतः योगयुक्तो मुनिर्ब्रह्मा न चिरेणाधिगच्छति. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Unless one is engaged in the devotional service of the Lord, mere renunciation of activities cannot make one happy. The sages, purified by works of devotion, achieve the supreme without delay. Text 7. Yoga yukto vishuddhatma vijitatma jitendriya sarvabhutatma bhutatma kurvan api na lipyate. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. One who works in devotion, who is a pure soul, and who controls his mind and senses, is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a man is never entangled. Text 8-9. नैव किञ्चित् करोत्मीति युक्तो मन्येन तत्त्ववित् पश्यन् श्रवन् स्पृशान् जिघ्रान् अश्नान् गच्छन् स्वपन् श्वसन् प्रलपन् विसृजन् गृह्णन् उन्मेषन् निशिसन् अपि इन्द्रियान्द्रियार्थेषु वर्तन्त इति धारयन्. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. A person in the divine consciousness, although engaged in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping, and breathing, always knows within himself that he actually does nothing at all. Because while speaking, evacuating, receiving, opening, or closing his eyes, he always knows that only the material senses are engaged with their objects and that he is aloof from them. Text 10. ब्रह्मणि अदया कर्माणि संगम त्यक्त्वा करोति य लिप्यते न स पापेन पद्मपत्रम इवाम भाषा. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. One who performs his duty without attachment, surrendering the results unto the Supreme God, is not affected by sinful action, as the lotus leaf is untouched by water. Text 11. कायेन मनसा बुद्धया केवलैरिन्द्रियैरपि योगिनः कर्म कुर्वन्ति सङ्गं त्याक्त्वा शुद्धये. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. The yogis, abandoning attachment, act with body, mind, intelligence, and even with the senses, only for the purpose of purification. Text 12. युक्त कर्म फलं त्यक्त्वा शान्तिम् आप्नोति नैष्ठिकीम् अयुक्त कामकारेण फले शक्तो निबध्यते. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. The steadily devoted soul attains unadulterated peace because he offers the result of all activities unto me. Whereas a person who is not in union with the divine, who is greedy for the fruits of his labor, becomes entangled. Text 13. सर्वकर्माणि मनसा सन्न्यास्यास्ते सुखं वासि नवद्वारे पुरे देहि नैव कुर्वान् न कार्यवान्. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. When the embodied living being controls his nature and mentally renounces all activities, he resides happily in the city of 9 gates, the material body, neither working nor causing work to be done. Text 14. न कृत्वा त्वं न कर्माणि लोकस्य सृजति प्रभु न कर्मफलसंयोगं स्वभावस्तु प्रवर्तते. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. The embodied spirit, master of the city of his body, does not create activities, nor does he induce people to act, nor does he create fruits of action. All this is enacted by the modes of material nature. Text 15. न दत्ते कस्यचित् पापं न चैव सुकृतं विभु अज्ञानेन व्रतं ज्ञानं तेन मुह्यन्ति जान्तव. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Nor does the Supreme Spirit assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. Embodied beings, however, are bewildered because of the ignorance which covers their real knowledge. Text 16. Jnanena tu tat ajnanam yesham nashitam atmanah aditya vajnanam prakashya. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. When, however, one is enlightened with the knowledge by which nescience is destroyed, then his knowledge reveals everything, as the sun lights up everything in the daytime. Text 7. Tad buddhayastad atmanastannishthastad parayanah gachanti apunar avritam jnana nirduta kalmasha. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. When one's intelligence, mind, faith, and refuge are all fixed in the Supreme, then one becomes fully cleansed of misgivings through complete knowledge and thus proceeds straight on the path of liberation. Text 18. Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmane Gavihastini Sunichaiva Swapake Cha Pandita Samadarshinaha. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. The humble sage, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmana, a cow and an elephant, a dog and a dog eater, outcast. Purport. A Krishna conscious person does not make any distinction between species or caste. The Brahman and the outcast may be different from the social point of view, or a dog, a cow, or an elephant may be different from the point of view of species. But these differences of body are meaningless from the viewpoint of a learned transcendentalist. This is due to the relationship to the Supreme for the Supreme Lord. By his plenary portion, as Paramatma is present in everyone's heart. Such an understanding of the Supreme is real knowledge. As far as the bodies are concerned, in different castes or different species of life, the Lord is equally kind to everyone because he treats every living being as a friend, yet maintains himself as Paramatma regardless of the circumstances of the living entities. The Lord as Paramatma is present both in the outcast and in the Brahmana, although the body of a Brahmana and that of an outcast are not the same. The bodies are material productions of different modes of material nature, but the soul and the supersoul within the body are of the same spiritual quantity. The similarity in the quantity of the soul and the supersoul, however, does not make them equal in quantity, for the individual soul is present only in that particular body, whereas the Paramatma is present in each and every body. A Krishna conscious person has full knowledge of these, and therefore he is truly learned and has equal vision. The similar characteristics of the soul and supersoul are that they are both conscious, eternal, and blissful. But the difference is that the individual soul is conscious within the limited jurisdiction of the body, whereas the supersoul is conscious of all bodies. The supersoul is present in all bodies without distinction. Text 19. Iha Ihaivate jita sargo yesham shamye sthitam mana nirdosham hi samam brahma tasmat brahmani e sthita. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Those whose minds are established in sameness and equanimity have already conquered the conditions of birth and death. They are flawless like Brahman, and thus they are already situated in Brahman. Text 20. न प्रयशेत प्रियं प्राप्य नोद्विजेत प्राप्य च प्रियं स्थिरबुद्धिर असामोद ब्रह्मविद ब्रह्मणि स्थितः. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. A person who neither rejoices upon achieving something pleasant nor laments upon obtaining something unpleasant, who is self-intelligent, unbewildered, and who knows the signs of God, is to be understood as already situated in transcendence. Text 21. बाह्यस्पर्शेव असाक्षात्मा विन्दति आत्मनि यत् सुखं स ब्रह्मयोगयुक्तात्मा सुखम akashayam ashnute. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Such a liberated person is not attracted to material sense pleasure or external objects, but is always in trance, enjoying the pleasure within. In this way, the self realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he concentrates on the Supreme. X22. ये हि संस्पर्शजा भोग दुःख योनय एव ते आदि अंतवत कौन्तेय न तेषु रमते बुद्ध. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. An intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery.